On the 23rd of March, Pakistan solemnly held a parade in honor of Pakistan Day. Islamabad shone with green and white flags. The measured step of thousands of soldiers merged with the roar of drums, asserting national pride. But just a day later in Washington, the United States organized a grandiose demonstration of military power, and the media all over the world trumpeted it. And then, at an international defense conference in Dubai, before hundreds of experts, scholars, and journalists, one American speaker allowed himself an arrogant remark: "The Pakistani parade is nothing. It can't even compare to a small fraction of American power." These words caused a murmur in the hall. Someone snickered. Someone nodded in approval. But no one expected that right after this, a Pakistani journalist would calmly stand up and, with just a few short phrases, make the whole hall fall silent, and the arrogant mockers shamefully lower their heads. What happened at that moment, and how could one voice from Pakistan manage to turn the tide of the international discussion? Let's follow this story full of pride. The conference hall sparkled with light. Flags of different countries stood in neat rows behind the presidium table. More than 1,000 people from all over the world were present. Retired officers, international scholars, journalists, even veterans of the defense industry. Everyone was waiting for opinions on regional security. Professor Thompson, a military expert from Washington, stood at the podium, his voice loud and clear. He pronounced each word with emphasis, deliberately letting the microphone carry the echo through the huge hall. Pakistan can hold parades for self-comfort, but in essence, it's just a symbolic performance. What can a country with limited economic influence, a few dozen outdated tanks, and a few old squadrons do? Compared to us, they are like a candle in front of the sun. A chuckle came from a corner of the hall. A few young American delegates applauded, and the whole atmosphere seemed to lean in favor of the one who had just spoken these scathing words. In the press rows, Ali, a Pakistani journalist, gripped the pen in his hand tightly, blood rushing to his face, his heart pounding furiously. He knew that if he remained silent, these derogatory words would be taken as a given in the eyes of the hundreds of people sitting here. But if he stood up, it would no longer be a personal opinion, but a voice representing an entire nation. The moderator from the UAE, Fatima, glanced towards the Pakistani seats. She gave a slight nod. "I invite the representative from Pakistan, journalist Ali. Would you like to share your opinion?" The camera lights immediately focused on him. The whispers died down. The entire hall froze in anticipation. Ali took a deep breath, put down his pen, and stood up. The quiet creak of his chair sounded in the complete silence. He took the microphone. His voice was calm, but firm. "Esteemed ladies and gentlemen, allow me to speak." The entire hall froze, all eyes fixed on him, waiting to see how the Pakistani journalist would respond to the provocation that had just been made. "Esteemed ladies and gentlemen, allow me to speak." The short phrase echoed in the silence, causing hundreds of people to involuntarily sit up straight. The cameras immediately pointed their lenses at the man in a simple white shalwar kameez, with a Pakistani journalist's accreditation on his chest. Some foreign reporters whispered, "Isn't that a journalist from Islamabad? How is he going to react?" Ali held the microphone. His gaze swept across the hall. His heart was still pounding, but his voice was calm and clear, each word seeming to be imprinted in the air. "The Pakistan Day Parade, esteemed ladies and gentlemen, is not intended to compete in numbers or chase after extravagance. It is a tribute to our ancestors, who fell on the fields of battle. It is a reminder to the younger generation that today's independence was won with blood and sweat. And this is where our real strength lies." A murmur rose in the hall. Some international delegates were surprised by his composure and clarity of thought. Interpreters hurriedly translated into different languages. Whispers could be heard in the headphones. Many tilted their heads, listening intently. Professor Thompson raised an eyebrow, the corners of his lips twisting into a sarcastic smile. He tapped his fingers lightly on the table and slowly replied, "Beautifully said. But, esteemed gentlemen, in this world, peace is protected by weapons. Spirit will not stop a missile, will not shoot down a bomber, And the Pakistani parade, in the end, is just a procession for self-reassurance. These cold words, like the blade of a knife, made many hold their breath. Some listeners nodded in approval, and from the corner where the American delegation sat, laughter was heard. Ali did not let go of the microphone. His eyes shone with determination. He did not raise his voice, but every word sounded firm. Mr. Professor, esteemed ladies and gentlemen, weapons can be bought with money, but national spirit cannot be borrowed. And history has proven that the Pakistani people have more than once faced an enemy many times superior in strength. If everything were measured only by numbers, we would have ceased to exist long ago. But we are still here, and our flag flies over our country. Suddenly, applause erupted from the middle rows, where the Turkish delegation was seated. A few scholars from Malaysia and Saudi Arabia also nodded. The hall was divided into two camps. Some continued to mock, others began to listen attentively. Professor Thompson was momentarily taken aback, but quickly recovered and gestured to a technical staff member. The large screen behind him lit up, and a comparative table appeared. The number of tanks, planes, and ships of the USA and Pakistan differed by tens, hundreds of times. He pointed to the screen triumphantly. Please, look at these numbers. A single objective comparison is enough to see how small Pakistan is in military terms. Their parade, if you call it a show of force, is like comparing a candle to the sun. The hall buzzed, cameras zoomed in on the table. Some spectators whispered, "Too big a difference. What can Pakistan say to this?" Ali looked at the screen. Everything inside him was boiling, but his face remained calm. He slowly said, "Mr. Professor, yes, these numbers are undeniable. But I want to ask you, does possessing a large number of weapons guarantee peace? Do nations exist because of arsenals, or because of an unyielding will? If the measure was only numbers, world history would not know examples of small nations rising to defend their country against powerful empires." He paused, looked directly into the camera lens, his voice becoming firmer. Pakistan holds a parade not to scare its neighbors, but to remind its children and grandchildren that freedom does not come easily. We measure strength not by the number of weapons, but by the life force of a nation, a force that no country can calculate in a table. This time, the applause was more scattered, but it was clear. A few foreign journalists quickly raised their cameras. Someone was hastily taking notes. The atmosphere became less tense. A note of curiosity appeared. Professor Thompson frowned, pursing his lips. "Beautiful, but these are just pretty words. When it comes to a real battlefield, can spirit stop bullets? I ask you, gentlemen, be realistic. Don't let touching stories obscure the harsh truth." This phrase seemed destined to end the argument. A few claps of support came from the American section of the audience. Ali gripped the microphone tightly. He took a deep breath, remembering the morning of the 23rd of March in Islamabad, the gray-haired veterans sitting silently with moist eyes as the neat columns marched past them. He clearly felt that if he remained silent, this sacred feeling would be ridiculed, turned into a joke. He spoke, quietly but firmly. "Esteemed ladies and gentlemen, allow me to tell a short story." The entire hall froze, hundreds of eyes fixed on him. The hall fell silent after Ali's words. "Allow me to tell a short story." He held the microphone, his gaze was direct, his voice steady but clear. On the morning of the 23rd of March, as the columns of soldiers marched through the parade ground, the television camera lens caught a row of veterans. Among them was a gray-haired old man, with medals shining on his chest. He sat with a straight back, and tears were in his eyes as he watched the green and white flag waving. He said just one sentence to his neighbor: "As long as the country is alive, as long as the flag flies, we are alive too." Esteemed ladies and gentlemen, for Pakistan, this is precisely the strength of the Pakistan Day Parade, in the reminder that independence is never given for free. A wave of whispers arose. Some nodded quietly, others frowned. But it was obvious that this story had silenced the hall for a moment. Professor Thompson smiled bitterly, clapped his hands twice, and slowly said, "Touching, But we are at an international defense conference, where we speak the language of numbers, the language of real power, not sentimental stories. I will allow myself to bring you back to reality, he signaled to the technicians, and the large screen behind him lit up again, showing colorful graphs and charts. The United States has over 2 million military personnel. Pakistan has less than 1 million. The number of tanks in the US is over 6,000. In Pakistan, barely a third of that. The US has almost 2,000 fighter jets. Pakistan has only a few hundred. For ships and submarines, the difference is many times over. Professor Thompson turned with a victorious look. I ask you, gentlemen, to look at these numbers. This is reality. On one side, the world's leading military power. On the other, a country with aging armaments. So what is the point of the Pakistani parade, other than a symbolic performance? Who can it scare? Can it protect the country? Or is it just a spectacle for self-comfort? A noise rose. Many applauded in support. The camera panned across the audience, capturing a few nodding heads and a few mocking smiles. Ali looked at the screen, each number striking his eyes, as if trying to suffocate his pride. He knew very well that this difference could not be denied, but he also knew that if he allowed the thesis of power measured only by numbers to prevail, Pakistan would always be looked down upon. He raised the microphone. His voice rang out loud and clear. Esteemed ladies and gentlemen, these numbers are correct. But I want to ask, does a large number of weapons guarantee peace? Does possessing a huge nuclear arsenal mean that the people will live in tranquility? Or are there nations that continue to exist proudly because their strength is measured not by quantity, but by an unyielding will? He paused, surveying the hall. A few international scholars from Europe and Southeast Asia began to whisper among themselves. Many journalists were scribbling furiously in their notebooks. Ali continued in a confident voice. The Pakistan Day Parade is not aimed at showcasing weapons. We are not participating in an arms race to boast, but to remind that every step of today's soldier is an echo of the past. It is a reminder to future generations that this freedom was paid for with blood. Weapons may become obsolete and fail over time, but memory and spirit are eternal. A murmur rose in the hall. Some applauded sporadically, but then the applause grew louder. The camera captured the faces of many international delegates, nodding in approval. Professor Thompson narrowed his eyes. The smile vanished from his face. He approached the microphone, lowered his voice, but emphasized each word. So you dare to claim that spirit can replace weapons? If a strong enemy attacks tomorrow, can these touching words stop missiles? Can they protect the country? The hall fell silent. The tension rose again. Many turned to Ali, waiting for his answer. He clenched the microphone, his fingers trembling slightly, but his voice was low and firm. Mr. Professor, I do not deny the role of weapons, but I would like to remind you of one fact. Pakistan has many times defended itself against armies far superior in strength, not because we had more tanks, but because behind the army stood the people. Weapons without the support of the people are just cold metal. And when the people have spirit, any weapon in their hands becomes a force. The whole hall suddenly fell silent. A few people from the international delegations started to applaud first. Then the applause spread. The camera panned down, capturing the thoughtful gazes of many scholars. Professor Thompson froze. He was about to say something, but suddenly a hand was raised from the back rows. It was an elderly man in an old, faded Pakistani army uniform, with a few old medals hanging on his chest. He leaned on a cane and stood up, his voice trembling but loud. I am a veteran of the 1965 war. I lived through days when bombs rained down on us, and the enemy was many times stronger. And yet we endured. Esteemed ladies and gentlemen, we won not only because of our weapons, but because of the spirit and the nation that stood behind us. Today's parade is a reminder of exactly that. The entire hall froze, and then unexpectedly erupted in thunderous applause. The camera pointed directly at the weary but proud face of the old soldier. Ali watched this scene, and his heart tightened. He understood that at this moment the situation was beginning to change. The applause, like waves, did not subside for a long time in the hall. The camera zoomed in on the face of the old man in the faded uniform, his cloudy eyes shining with pride. Under the lights, the metals with worn edges gleamed on his chest. He leaned on a cane, his voice trembled, but it was clear. I went through the war. I stood in the ranks. I saw my comrades fall beside me. We didn't have many weapons, but we had the faith that this country must live. Today, I see my grandchildren and great-grandchildren at the parade in Islamabad, and I understand that the blood of my comrades was not shed in vain. So please, do not consider our parade a performance. It is memory. It is faith. It is a promise to those who died. Silence fell. Many international delegates lowered their heads. Some journalists wiped away tears. The initial whispering from the American spectators also stopped. Ali looked at the old man, his heart overflowing with emotion. He knew he was not alone. The voice of the past had spoken, drowning out the cold numbers. But just as the hall quieted down, Professor Thompson approached the microphone with a pale smile on his lips. Respected veteran, your story has touched me, but forgive me. We are discussing today's security reality, not the past. Spirit and memory are wonderful, but if a war starts tomorrow, can they protect the country? Today's world runs on technology, on the power of deterrence, not on memories. Scattered applause was heard again from the American delegation's section. The touching atmosphere instantly turned tense. Ali gripped the microphone tightly. He understood that now he had to support the fire that had just been lit, not let it be extinguished by a hailstorm of ridicule. He raised his head, his voice rang out clearly. Mr. Professor, esteemed ladies and gentlemen, yes, we must look at today's reality. But please, do not forget that history is not a museum exhibit. History is a living lesson, the foundation of today's strength. If a nation forgets the path it has traveled, then even the largest arsenal will be but a tree without roots. Applause sounded loudly, this time stronger. The camera panned across the international rows. A Saudi scholar nodded. A French journalist whispered exactly. Professor Thompson frowned slightly but remained calm. He changed his tactic. Esteemed ladies and gentlemen, I do not deny the role of spirit, but let's be realistic. A small country with few weapons cannot survive without the patronage of great powers. Doesn't Pakistan exist today because of the help of others? If it weren't for that, would they be standing here to argue? These words, like a knife, struck at the very heart of pride. A strong murmur arose, and a few laughs were heard from the American spectators section. The camera zoomed in on Ali's face, awaiting his reaction. He gripped the microphone tightly. A fire ignited in his eyes. He knew that this question was aimed not only at him but at the entire history of the nation, and he would not let it go unanswered. The entire hall held its breath. Professor Thompson's question was as sharp as a blade, aimed directly at the pride of a Pakistani. If it weren't for patronage, would Pakistan exist today? Ali stood straight, still holding the microphone. His gaze swept across the hall. He knew that if he evaded the answer, Pakistan would always be perceived as weak. If he answered too emotionally, he would be considered biased. He had to choose another path, with sharp logic, restrained, but no less resolute. He spoke in a low but resonant voice. Mr. Professor, esteemed ladies and gentlemen, if you say that Pakistan exists because of dependence, then let me ask, who shed blood on the battlefields throughout our history? Who fell so that our flag could continue to fly? We appreciate the help of friends, but no one could protect this land except the Pakistani people themselves. A murmur immediately rose. Some international scholars leaned forward, listening intently. Ali continued in a loud voice. Esteemed ladies and gentlemen, weapons can be received as aid, but the spirit of independence cannot be gifted. In the harshest years, if the Pakistani people were not determined to fight, could that aid have held every inch of land? It is will and courage that are the foundation, not patronage, as the professor says. Applause erupted from the Southeast Asian delegations section. A Malaysian scholar nodded vigorously. The camera captured foreign journalists smiling in agreement. Professor Thompson was slightly flustered, but still tried to maintain an arrogant demeanor. He sneered sarcastically. "Sounds heroic. But today's world is not like the past. The era of history lessons is over. Look at the present. How long can a small country with few weapons last among the great powers?" Ali immediately replied. His voice was cold but calm. "Mr. Professor, if you look at the world only through the lens of big and small countries, then we will always miss the most important lesson: justice. Real strength lies not only in the arsenal, but in whether the people believe in their country. A country can possess thousands of missiles, but if the people turn away from it, all of it will turn into a pile of scrap metal." The entire hall erupted in applause. Cries of "Bravo!" came from the European section. American, French, and German journalists whispered among themselves, their eyes burning. Professor Thompson frowned. He stepped down from the podium, walked around it as if trying to exert pressure, then stopped and pointed the microphone directly at Ali. "You speak beautifully, but if national spirit is enough, then why have many other small nations disappeared from the world map? Can spirit replace technology? Or is it just a sedative?" The hall buzzed again. Some spectators turned to Ali with a questioning look, waiting. The atmosphere was tense to the extreme. Ali took a deep breath. Images from books about war flashed through his mind. Pictures of ordinary people who defended their villages, their land with their bare hands. He held his head high. His voice sounded confident. "Mr. Professor, I do not deny technology, but let me ask, if there is only technology, but no will, no support from the people, can those weapons hold a country? Pakistan exists not because of anyone's patronage, but because Pakistanis have never surrendered. That is what sets us apart." Applause thundered throughout the hall, unceasing. Many cameras were pointed directly at Ali, capturing every feature of his face, every word. Professor Thompson gripped the microphone tightly, his face showing irritation. But before he could object, a hand was raised from the back of the hall. It was an American journalist with bright blonde hair. She stood up and asked in a clear voice, "Excuse me, Professor Thompson, but if we rely only on military force, can the world be stable? And I would like to ask the Pakistani journalist, if you do not participate in an arms race, how does Pakistan intend to protect peace?" All eyes turned to Ali. The camera zoomed in on his face. This was the most difficult moment. He had to give a convincing answer not only to Professor Thompson, but to the whole world that was watching the live broadcast. The American journalist's question stunned the entire hall. Many started buzzing, discussing. All eyes fixed on Ali. He stood there, the microphone still in his hand, sweat beading on his forehead, but his gaze was unwavering. He spoke in a clear voice. "Pakistan does not participate in an arms race to prove its strength. We build our defense on the principle of sufficiency. Enough for self-defense, enough to protect our people, and enough to send a clear signal. We love peace, but we will never bow our heads. That is why our Pakistan Day Parade is not aimed at boasting, but at reminding that today's peace was won with blood, and so that the younger generation understands that a nation is truly strong only when the people believe in their homeland." The hall was silent for a few seconds, and then erupted in applause that spread from the Southeast Asian delegations to the European and African rows. The camera panned across the hall, capturing nodding faces, moved gazes. Professor Thompson frowned, his lips pressed tightly together. He returned to his seat, but his gaze remained hostile, as if he was not going to give up. The morning session ended in an atmosphere of tension mixed with excitement. As people began to disperse, Ali went out into the corridor, sighing with relief as if he had just come out of a battle. But he didn't have time to relax before a hand was placed on his shoulder. It was a member of the organizing committee, an Emirati, with a polite demeanor. His voice was quiet, barely audible. "Mr. Ali, I just wanted to remind you to be careful. Criticism is good, But you shouldn't go too far. This is an international forum, and we must maintain a balance. Ali looked him straight in the eye, nodded politely, but a thought rose in his mind. If the truth cannot be spoken for fear of upsetting the balance, then what justice is left? He walked on. His phone vibrated. An anonymous message appeared on the screen. "Shut up, or your journalism career ends here." Ali froze. A cold sweat ran down his back. He looked around the corridor. People were coming and going, but no one was paying him any attention. It was clear that this was a targeted warning. He gripped the phone tightly in his hand. For a moment, anxiety flashed through his mind. If he continued, would he have to pay for it? But then he remembered the look of the old veteran, remembered the thunderous applause of international friends. A thought flashed in his mind. Silence now is equivalent to agreement. He could not retreat. That evening, Ali returned to his hotel room. Outside, Dubai shone with lights. The streets were bustling. He sat down at the table, opened his laptop, quickly jotted down a few lines in an electronic notepad. Today, I said what I had to say. They can threaten, they can pressure, but the truth cannot be buried. Tomorrow, I will continue. He closed his laptop, took a deep breath. He knew that an even more serious battle awaited him, and tomorrow morning, in front of the entire international press, he would have to face Professor Thompson in an open discussion. The next morning, the press conference hall was packed. Hundreds of journalists crowded around. Cameras and photographers were aimed at the podium. The atmosphere was charged, like a battlefield. The moderator announced that after yesterday's heated debate, the organizing committee had decided to dedicate the morning press conference to direct questions from the press. Please, your questions. A Japanese journalist immediately raised his hand. Mr. Ali, Pakistan doesn't have much modern weaponry, so why hold a parade? Isn't it just a formality to hide weakness? A murmur rose in the hall. Ali took the microphone. His gaze was calm. Our parade is not aimed at hiding anything. On the contrary, it reminds the entire nation that peace does not come for free. It is a way to pay respect to our ancestors and to affirm that the Pakistani army is born of the people and for the people. This is the most enduring strength. Sparse applause was heard, but right after that, an American journalist jumped up, his voice sharp. You speak touchingly, but let me ask, if you don't have a large arsenal, what will you defend the country with? Won't you have to rely entirely on the intervention of other great powers? The sarcastic question caused a stir in the hall. The camera zoomed in on Ali, waiting to see how he would handle the situation. He took a deep breath and answered clearly, Esteemed ladies and gentlemen, military power is important, but one cannot rely solely on it. Pakistan builds its defense on the principles of self-reliance, independence, without military alliances, relying on no one. We have enough strength to protect our country, and most importantly, our people believe in it. Applause came from the ASEAN rows, but laughter was heard from the American delegation's side. Suddenly, the large screen behind them lit up. A video clip was shown, edited from fragments of the March 23rd parade in Islamabad, showing only unfavorable angles. A few old vehicles, while footage of modern JF-17 Thunderjets and air defense systems was cut out. A caption ran at the bottom. Pakistani parade, just a formality. The hall buzzed. A few foreign journalists whispered, Is this official material? Why does it all look so shabby? Ali stood silently, looking at the screen. He immediately understood that this was a targeted attack, an edit to distort the image. For a moment, it seemed to him that the entire hall was leaning towards his opponent's side. The moderator Fatima frowned, turning to the technicians. Where did this video come from? Who provided it? No one answered. Professor Thompson smiled, crossing his arms. Ali gripped the microphone tightly. A decision flashed in his mind. If he didn't respond now, the truth would be distorted. He took a step forward. His voice rang out loud. Esteemed ladies and gentlemen, this video clip was edited. It only selected old footage to deceive perception. But those of you who watched the live broadcast of the parade clearly saw that we have modern aviation, We have air defense. We have thousands of soldiers marching in step, and most importantly, tens of thousands of joyful people on the streets. This is the true image of Pakistan. The hall buzzed again. Some journalists began to search for materials on their computers. Someone was checking original photos. Rumors spread quickly. Yes, I watched it live. There weren't just a few old vehicles. Ali looked directly into the camera lens. His voice was low and strong. Someone truly strong does not need to distort the truth. And if one has to resort to editing to prove their superiority, then that is not strength, but weakness. This phrase, like a hammer blow, resounded in the hall. The applause exploded. This time it was longer and louder, spreading throughout the hall. The camera zoomed in on many foreign journalists nodding. Someone raised a thumb in approval. Professor Thompson froze, but his gaze remained defiant. He approached the microphone, his voice insistent. Fine. If you think spirit is more important, get ready. This afternoon, I propose that the organizing committee hold a live debate, so the whole world can see how long Pakistan can withstand the naked truth of numbers. The hall buzzed. Cameras turned to Ali. It seemed the whole world was waiting for his answer. He gripped the microphone tightly, his heart pounding furiously. This was no longer a question, but a public challenge. Professor Thompson's challenge echoed through the hall. Hundreds of eyes were fixed on Ali, waiting to see if he dared to accept it. The atmosphere was tense, like a taut string about to snap. Ali stood silently for a few seconds, his hand gripping the microphone tightly. Images of the March 23rd parade flashed through his mind. Columns of tanks, squadrons of JF-17 seconds cutting through the sky, veterans with reddened eyes, and tens of thousands of people waving flags. He knew that the truth was always stronger than edited videos. He held his head high. His voice rang out loud. Esteemed ladies and gentlemen, I accept the challenge. If a direct discussion is needed, I am ready. But first, allow me a few minutes to clarify the situation with the video that was just shown. Right here. A murmur rose in the hall. Cameras zoomed in on Ali's face, capturing every detail of his expression. The moderator Fatima nodded slightly, signaling the technicians. Ali took a USB drive from his pocket and handed it to the technical staff. This is the original material from Pakistan State Television, the full recording of the Pakistan Day Parade. I want you to compare and see the difference. The large screen lit up, and a magnificent picture appeared on it. Neat columns of infantry, marching in step. Rows of Al-Khalid tanks, their tracks rumbling. Modern air defense systems, radars, following one another. And in the sky, squadrons of JF-17 Thunderjets roared, leaving white smoke trails behind them, cutting through the clouds. The lens also captured the faces of gray-haired veterans with shining eyes, and a sea of people waving flags and cheering the troops on both sides of the street. The entire hall froze. These vivid images were too bright, too different from the previous edited video. Many foreign journalists whispered, "Indeed, it was cut. Unfair. The original is much more impressive." Ali took a step forward. His voice was low but sharp. As you can see, the truth cannot be hidden. That clip was distorted to turn our parade into a laughingstock. But when the truth was shown, you saw the difference. And please remember, a truly strong country does not need to resort to editing to prove its superiority. The applause exploded, this time stronger and more insistent. The camera panned across the faces. A French journalist jumped up and applauded. A Saudi scholar nodded continuously. The Malaysian delegation exchanged looks of approval. Professor Thompson stood frozen, his face slightly reddened. He gripped the microphone tightly, trying to maintain his composure. Fine, you've seen the pictures. But remember, a few squadrons of planes, or a few dozen tanks, cannot change the strategic balance. The parade in Pakistan, no matter how beautifully filmed, cannot hide the real difference in power. Ali did not evade, he nodded. Yes, we do not deny the difference, nor do we hide it. We hold a parade not to compare every gun, every tank. We hold a parade to remind our people where this independence came from and how it must be cherished. This is a strength that cannot be measured by any numbers. The applause rang out again, echoing off the ceiling of the hall. At that moment, the moderator Fatima spoke. "Thank you both. After this press conference, the organizing committee has decided that this afternoon there will be a live debate broadcast to the entire world between Professor Thompson and journalist Ali, so that the world not only hears but also sees." A murmur arose, cameras swirled. This would be a real battle, without editing, without omissions. Ali took a deep breath, his heart pounding furiously. He knew that what would happen this afternoon would not be just a personal dispute, but a matter of national honor. In the afternoon in Dubai, the golden sun bathed the shiny glass buildings. After the sensational press conference, the news of the clash between Ali and Professor Thompson quickly spread across international websites. Many newspapers came out with bold headlines. Pakistani journalist challenges American expert at security forum. Excerpts from Ali's speeches were constantly published, gaining tens of thousands of views in just a few hours. In a small cafe near the hotel, Ali sat with a few new international friends he had met at the forum. The moderator, Fatima, was also there. The atmosphere was less formal, but everyone understood that a big battle was ahead tomorrow. Raj, an Indian scholar, tapped on the table. "Ali, you must prepare well. Professor Thompson will not back down so easily. He masterfully uses numbers and overwhelming comparisons. But don't forget that numbers don't always reflect the truth." Claire, a French journalist, added, "You need short and punchy phrases. Television viewers won't remember long arguments, but they will remember keywords, strong images." Fatima looked at Ali with a serious expression. Tomorrow will not just be a debate, but a major event for the world's media. Millions of people will be watching. You need to stay calm, and remember that every word you say will be taken as the voice of Pakistan. Ali nodded, his expression full of determination. He opened his notebook and wrote 3 short phrases, each like an arrow. Weapons can be bought, but national spirit can never be borrowed. A country is strong not when it has a large arsenal, but when the people believe in their country. True strength is not about making others fear, but about making the whole world respect. He underlined each phrase, repeating it to himself to turn them into sharp weapons for tomorrow. Night fell. Dubai shone with lights. The streets were bustling with life. In his hotel room, Ali opened his laptop to check the news. Suddenly, he saw on social media a short, distorted video clip of his speech with the caption, "Pakistan admits its weakness, relying only on spirit." Ali's heart sank. It was obvious that someone had started a dirty information campaign to undermine his credibility before the debate. He closed the screen, took a deep breath. The voice of the old veteran from the hall echoed in his mind. "As long as the country is alive, as long as the flag flies, we are alive too," he whispered quietly. "Tomorrow I will not speak for myself. I will speak for the entire nation." Outside, the night wind of Dubai was blowing. Ali sat silently at the table and wrote in his journal, "The night before the big battle, I am not afraid of losing. I am afraid that the truth will be distorted. If I remain silent, it will be equivalent to agreement. And if I speak out, even if I fail, I will not regret it." He closed the notebook, stood up, and looked at the bright city sky. A new day awaited him. And with it, a battle not only of arguments, but of honor. The next day, the large hall of the Congress Center in Dubai was shining with lights. On the electronic display above, a sign glowed in several languages. Special debate. Is military power the measure of peace? The hall was packed. Thousands of delegates, scholars, and international journalists sat in dense rows. Millions of viewers around the world were glued to their television screens for the live broadcast. The atmosphere was tense, exciting, like a final match. On the stage, 2 tables stood opposite each other. At one, Professor Thompson from the USA, with a confident look and a cold gaze. At the other, Ali, the Pakistani journalist, in a neat dark shalwar kameez, with a calm face, but his eyes burned with determination. Between them was Fatima, the moderator, strict and impartial. Fatima began, her voice echoing loudly through the microphone. Esteemed ladies and gentlemen, today we will have a frank dialogue. Professor Thompson will present his point of view on military power, and journalist Ali will present a view from Pakistan. I invite Professor Thompson. Professor Thompson stood up, waved his hand, pointing to the screen. Numerous images, graphs, and numbers appeared. Defense budgets, the number of tanks, planes, ships. He spoke loudly, each word like a hammer blow. In our era, peace is protected only by the force of arms. Can a small country with a few dozen squadrons, a few dozen tanks, withstand a powerful enemy? Let's be frank. The Pakistani parade does not prove strength, it only proves weakness. Thunderous applause came from the American delegations section. A few whistles of support. The hall buzzed. Fatima turned to Ali. Please, Mr. Ali, your response. Ali slowly stood up. He looked not at Professor Thompson, but directly at the hall, at the cameras that were broadcasting his speech to the whole world. His voice sounded calm, but strong. Esteemed ladies and gentlemen, yes, Pakistan does not have as many tanks or planes as the USA, but strength is measured not only by the number of weapons. If there are only weapons, but no people, then it is all just soulless metal. Our parade is not aimed at scaring anyone, but at reminding that this country was built and defended by blood, by an unyielding will. Silence fell, and then applause came from the ASEAN section, which spread to Europe. The camera zoomed in on the face of an American journalist with tears in her eyes. Professor Thompson smiled disdainfully, his voice full of sarcasm. Beautiful words, but when war comes, can spirit stop missiles? Be realistic. This world is built not on emotions, but on strength. Ali did not rush to answer. He paused for a few seconds, and then said clearly, word for word, Mr. Professor, if strength lies only in weapons, then countries with huge nuclear arsenals would have already brought peace to the whole world. But what is the reality? Conflicts continue to erupt. Wars continue. Peace comes not from fear, but from justice, from mutual respect. And this is precisely what Pakistan emphasizes at every one of its parades. The applause exploded. Some international spectators even stood up. The camera panned down, capturing an Indian scholar giving a thumbs up. A German journalist nodded in approval. Fatima intervened, her voice ringing out loud. Thank you both. We will now move to quick questions from the hall. Many hands went up. A Malaysian journalist asked, Mr. Ali, if you do not participate in an arms race, how does Pakistan intend to maintain its independence? Ali answered without hesitation. We maintain our independence through the principle of self-sufficiency, relying on our own strength, not depending on anyone, and always putting the people at the center of everything. Our weapons may be fewer, but our will is greater than anyone's. The hall erupted in applause, but at that moment, an American journalist suddenly held up a stack of documents and shouted into the microphone. Excuse me, journalist Ali, if spirit is so important, why is Pakistan still forced to import weapons from abroad? Are your words not empty? The entire hall froze. The camera immediately zoomed in on Ali. A wrong answer to this question could destroy his entire argument. He gripped the microphone tightly, taking a deep breath. This was the biggest test. One answer, and he would either be crushed or make the whole world fall silent. The atmosphere in the hall became oppressive. The American journalist's question was as sharp as a knife. If spirit is so important, why is Pakistan still forced to import weapons from abroad? Are your words not empty? A whisper arose. Many leaned back in their chairs, waiting to see how Ali would get out of this. The camera zoomed in on his face. This was the decisive moment. Ali gripped the microphone tightly, an unusual light shining in his eyes. He did not get into long arguments, and did not refute with numbers. He slowly, in a low, warm voice, said, Esteemed ladies and gentlemen, I will not answer with theory. I will just tell a short story, literally for 30 seconds. The hall fell silent. All eyes were fixed on him. He took a deep breath and slowly began. Last year in Lahore, I met a veteran. The old man pointed to a long scar on his chest and said, "When the enemy shot at me, the rifle in my hands was not the newest or the most powerful, but I knew that behind me was my whole family, my village, my country. I wasn't shooting to show off a weapon. I was shooting to protect those I love." Ali paused, looked directly into the camera lens. His voice became lower. "Yes, we buy weapons, but a weapon is just a tool. What has allowed us to survive to this day is not the tool, but the unyielding spirit that is our answer." The entire hall froze, as if rooted to the spot. The camera panned across the faces of the international spectators. The American journalist covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes glistening. An African scholar nodded, whispering something to his neighbor. Many others sat up straight, not blinking, and then, as if on command, the hall erupted in applause. At first, sparse, and then louder and longer. Some even jumped up, applauding enthusiastically. Professor Thompson frowned. He raised the microphone, trying to get a word in. "That's just a touching story. But we are discussing international security, not a novel." But his words were drowned out by the unceasing applause. The camera focused on Ali, capturing his calm gaze, his straight posture. He did not smile, was not proud, but simply bowed silently. The moderator Fatima raised her hand, asking for silence. When the applause subsided, she said, "Thank you, Mr. Ali. That was not just a 30-second story, it was a message. But for fairness, we will give Professor Thompson a chance to respond." Professor Thompson squeezed the microphone, anger flashing in his eyes. He lowered his voice, emphasizing each word. "Fine. If you want to turn this hall into a place for storytelling, then I will turn it into a place where the harshest truth is spoken. I will show the whole world that Pakistan is not capable of defending itself." The hall buzzed again. The camera zoomed in on Ali's face, catching the slightest reaction. He remained calm, but his hand gripped the microphone so tightly that the veins stood out. He knew that Professor Thompson's next words would not be just attacks, but a full-scale assault. The atmosphere in the hall became tense again to the extreme. Professor Thompson came forward, forcefully placed a stack of documents on the table, his gaze fixed directly on Ali. His voice sounded sharp, as if cutting through the air. "Esteemed ladies and gentlemen, I do not deny the value of spirit, but spirit cannot replace missiles, will cannot intercept planes. Today, Pakistan is still forced to import weapons. If it weren't for this support, could they survive? Let's be honest. They exist only because of others. Everything journalist Ali has said is just beautiful words to hide their weakness." A loud noise arose. Several journalists nodded. Someone whistled in support. Thunderous applause came from the American spectators section. The camera continuously panned, capturing the arrogant expression on Professor Thompson's face. He did not stop, continuing to insist. "This world is cruel. No one respects a small country if it doesn't have a deterrent force. If Pakistan doesn't have modern weapons, then let it know its place. It is just a second-rate country. Accept the truth instead of embellishing it with touching stories." The thunderous applause seemed to want to drown Ali. Many lenses were aimed directly at him, awaiting a reaction. For a moment, he was in the center of a storm. Ali held the microphone, his hand clenched white. He could clearly feel every gaze fixed on him. Gazes of doubt, expectation, even contempt. But a strong fire ignited within him. He knew that if he did not stand firm now, everything he had said before would collapse. He took a deep breath. His gaze became bright. His voice sounded, not loud, but enough to cut through the noise. "Mr. Professor, esteemed ladies and gentlemen, you say we exist only because of dependence. I want to ask, if so, then who fell on Pakistani soil? Who defended every inch of land with their blood? No great power can pay that price. If we lived only under patronage, then Pakistan would not exist today for you to mock it." The noise gradually subsided. A sudden silence fell in the hall. The camera captured the faces of many international spectators. Some nodded, others frowned in thought. Ali paused, and then his voice sounded stronger, each word clear. You say that only weapons make others fear, and I believe that only justice makes others respect. Weapons can compel for a moment, but when the barrel is lowered, what remains? Only faith and national spirit exist forever. Applause erupted from the European section, and then spread to other rows, but from the American side, it was quiet. Their gazes were cold. A half-smile played on Professor Thompson's lips. Fatima approached, raised her hand, her voice ringing out loudly. We have come to the end. To conclude this debate, I propose that each side have exactly 60 seconds to give their final definition of what constitutes the true strength of a nation. The hall buzzed again. Cameras panned across the two main protagonists. Professor Thompson adjusted the microphone, took a deep breath, preparing to deliver the final blow. Ali clenched his hand tightly. The words of the old veteran echoed in his mind. As long as the country is alive, as long as the flag flies, we are alive too. The entire hall held its breath. The camera lenses were aimed at the stage, where the two main characters were preparing to deliver their closing statements. Fatima looked at the red numbers on the electronic clock behind her. Her voice rang out loud. I invite Professor Thompson. You have 60 seconds. Professor Thompson stood up, his face serious. He took a few steps towards the hall, microphone in hand, his voice loud. Esteemed ladies and gentlemen, the true strength of a nation is the ability to make others silent. It is an arsenal large enough that no one dares to attack you. Let's be realistic. This world respects only the strong, listens only to those who can impose their will with firepower. A country can tell as many touching stories as it wants, but if it doesn't have a deterrent force, it's all just an illusion. Thunderous applause came from the American delegations section. A few other spectators also supported, but in many international rows, the atmosphere became gloomy. Gazes were cold. Someone crossed their arms. Someone quietly shook their head. Fatima raised her hand. Thank you, Professor. Now I invite Mr. Ali. You have 60 seconds. Ali stood up, stepped into the center of the light. His heart pounded furiously, but his voice was firm and clear. Every word. Esteemed ladies and gentlemen, for me, the true strength of a nation is not to make others fear, but to make them respect. Weapons can compel for a moment, but when the barrel is lowered, what remains? If the people do not believe in their country, if the world does not respect it, then even the largest arsenal is just a pile of scrap metal. He paused. His gaze swept across the international rows, and then he looked directly into the camera. We hold a parade not to boast, but to remember. Pakistan has existed, exists, and will exist. Not because we have the most weapons, but because we have the support of the people. We have a will that will never be broken. That is true strength. Silence fell. And then, as if someone had given a signal, the hall erupted in applause, this time not sparse, but thunderous and prolonged. Some spectators even stood up, applauding non-stop. The camera panned across the European, African, and Asian sections. Many shouted bravo, respect. Professor Thompson stood motionless, his face tense, the arrogant smile gone, replaced by an expression of irritation and helplessness. Fatima tapped the microphone quietly. Her voice sounded, "Thank you both. The official debate is over. But it is clear that today we have heard not only numbers, but also values." The hall was still applauding. Ali bowed. His face was calm, but an indescribable pride was boiling inside him. He knew that this moment would resonate for a long time, not only in this hall, but on the airwaves around the world. The applause did not subside even after the debate ended. Television cameras panned across the hall, capturing moved faces, nods, and unceasing applause. This scene was broadcast live around the world. Millions of people from afar witnessed how a Pakistani journalist stood up to defend the honor of his people. In the conference corridor, right after the debate ended, Ali was mobbed by international journalists. Reporters crowded around, holding microphones. A French journalist asked loudly, "Mr. Ali, do you believe that Pakistan won today's debate?" Ali smiled and shook his head. "It's not about winning or losing. What's important is that the truth was spoken, and our voice was heard." An American journalist pushed her way forward. "Aren't you afraid that these statements will cause tension in relations with the us?" He answered resolutely. "My words were not directed against anyone. I only reminded of a value. Peace cannot be maintained by fear. It can only be strengthened by respect. Pakistan always strives for that respect." Ali's short, restrained, but firm answers immediately became hot headlines. Just a few hours later, major news agencies published articles. A voice from Pakistan silenced an international hall. Without weapons, Pakistani journalist proved the power of spirit. Debate in Dubai. Pakistan asserts justice. Meanwhile, in the American delegation section, a heavy atmosphere prevailed. Some faces, initially enthusiastic, were now downcast. Professor Thompson left quickly, refusing to comment. His flustered appearance as he left the hall was captured by cameras and spread across the internet with the caption, "The loser of the debate." In a small cafe on the conference grounds, Ali sat with a few international friends. The Indian scholar Raj clapped him on the shoulder. "You said what many other smaller countries have long wanted to say. Today, Pakistan spoke not only for itself, but for them." Claire, the French journalist, smiled. "You didn't just argue, you left an image of a small but proud people who do not bow their heads." The moderator Fatima came over, her expression thoughtful. She didn't say much, just nodded quietly. "You made the whole hall respect Pakistan." Ali was silent for a few seconds and quietly replied, "It wasn't me. It's the history, the spirit of my people. I just repeated it." That night, the international press continued to publish excerpts from the debate. Ali's words were widely shared on social media, becoming a popular hashtag number, Respect Pakistan. People from all over the world left comments. "I never thought about parades in this way. Very touching. A small country, but with a big voice. Strength is not only in weapons, but in the support of the people." Pakistan proved it. In his hotel room, Ali opened his phone and read messages from friends in Pakistan. One of them wrote, "You made us proud. Everyone at home was watching live. The whole country is talking about you." He put down his phone, took a deep breath, his heart filled with pride and relief. He understood that the battle was not over, but today, at least, Pakistan had earned respect. A night in Dubai. Tall buildings shone with lights, reflecting on the shimmering surface of the Gulf. The city was still noisy, but in a small hotel room, Ali sat alone by a glass window, silently watching the flow of cars below. On the table lay an open notebook, a blank page waiting for his final entries. He picked up a pen, his hand still trembling slightly after the tense day, but his heart was surprisingly light. He wrote, "Today I witnessed a miracle, an ordinary journalist, without power, without weapons. But when he spoke the truth, the entire international hall was forced to listen. Maybe I didn't change the balance of power, but I believe I changed many people's view of Pakistan." He put down the pen, raised his head, and looked out the window. The image of the trembling veteran with a cane came to his mind, his hoarse voice. "As long as the country is alive, as long as the flag flies, we are alive too." These words seemed to be carved into his heart. They became the strength that guided him through all the pressure, all the threats. The phone vibrated quietly. A message from a colleague in Islamabad. "The whole country is talking about you. People are sharing clips of your speech. Everyone is moved. You made us hold our heads high." Ali smiled. He did not consider this his personal victory, but a victory for his people, for their unyielding spirit. He told himself, "We don't need to boast to be recognized. We just need to remind the world that Pakistan may not be the richest, but it has never been weak. Our strength is in our people, in our memory and will that will never fade." Outside, the night wind was blowing, carrying a distant noise. Ali quietly closed his notebook, placed the pen on the table. He knew that many more challenges awaited him, but at least today, he had made a contribution to helping the world better understand Pakistan. He stood up, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon, where the lights of Dubai merged with the night darkness. A quiet whisper echoed in his soul, as if addressed to his compatriots back home. We, Pakistanis, have never surrendered and will never surrender. At that moment, Ali clearly felt that even one small word, spoken at the right moment, could become a thunder that would make the whole world listen. How do you feel after this story? If you are proud of Pakistan, leave a comment, share the video so many will know, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow our next stories.